Just to introduce myself, I'm a planner. I've been working at Planning Aid Scotland for the last 15 years, and I'm also a member of my community council, although I have been on a break recently due to pressures, but I'm hoping to go back in the new year. That's Southside Community Council in Edinburgh, where I live. So I hope that gives me a bit of insight into has given me insight into the work of community councils and, of course, the challenges that community councillors face. What we're going to do tonight is, I'm hoping that maybe a lot of the people here know who Planning Aid Scotland are as an organisation. I will run through that to give you an overview. It's a shortish event, so I'm going to give you a fly-through overview of local place plans, what they are and what they're not. We'll look at what content could be in a local place plan, a bit at what's involved in preparing a local place plan. That'll vary from area to area, a bit about what support's available, and probably most importantly, questions and answers and discussion. And we'd ask you to hold those and ask them verbally at the end. I can't really monitor the chat as we go through, but obviously use the chat if you've got comments, and we'll look afterwards as well. It's planning, so there's no, as I always say, it's complex. There's never a stupid question or a wrong question, in my opinion, in planning. So this is Planning Aid Scotland is a charity and also a social enterprise. So we're part funded by Scottish Government to do some of our work, and some of it we are contracted for by various organisations. So I won't be reading everything out, but you can see our vision, our mission to help people navigate the planning system. I think that's what we're doing tonight around the potential future of your places, and our values and our strategic priorities. Got a team of about 10 people, part-time and full-time. And it's actually our 30th anniversary this being marked this year of being, excuse me, I've had COVID, so I might cough occasionally. Sorry about that. Yeah, it's our 30th anniversary this year, and we'll be marking that through from now to next year with various events. So we provide a planning advice service that is used by community councils and individuals. It's a free service, so please use it and tell people about it. It's our core service, and that's what the Scottish Government particularly funds us to do. We range from people wanting to know about householder changes to people wanting help with representations, objections to planning applications, business startups, enforcement, planning appeals, change of use. Do I need planning permission to run a business from home? We get absolutely everything. We're going on 1,000 inquiries a year from all around Scotland, and that's always confidential and impartial advice from chartered planners, including staff and volunteers. We're not going to be a consultant for you. We're here to facilitate you, to be educational and help you move things forward yourself. And we do training events where sometimes we go out as an offshoot of the advice service to do a one-off talk to specific community councils, but sometimes on a social enterprise basis, we're brought in by a specific council to do a full or half days training, quite often for community councils, all the community councils in the area, or for elected members, and various other groups. I won't dwell on that, but contact me if you want to know more. We're a community engagement organisation. We come in to run a range of community engagement projects in communities when we're commissioned to do so, with an impartial perspective, and we're about trying to help communities have open and inclusive conversations and unlock and articulate how you would like your area to be in the future. And a big part of that in the last 10 years has been doing a range of community-led plans, within which obviously local place plans feature. That was us up in Applecross, who had a real shortage of land for new homes and affordable housing. So we were helping them map out sites where new houses could go, working in partnership with the council, the landowner, and other relevant organisations. We also respond, as part of my role, coordinating responses to Scottish Government consultations. Very important one that closed recently, their guidance on how local councils can effectively engage people in local development plans. And we are, of course, volunteer-based, I would say, organisation with a few hundred planners signed up to help us deliver our services. They're not all active at one time, but they're there to help us when we need them. So thanks for listening to that. Move straight into talking about the real topic of tonight, which is local place plans. I think if you're in a community council, you'll probably, I'm not going to do any show of hands or anything, but I'm going to assume there's some people here who might know a bit and some people who might be have only heard about local place plans yesterday. So that's going to be my starting point. So to set the scene and or context, as I'm calling it, there was a new Planning Act which started as a bill in 2006, and within that act, as it was written and gained royal assent, there was introduced a new statutory right for communities to prepare a plan for their place. Now, that doesn't mean communities haven't been doing that for as long as we can remember. They have, and Applecross was an example of that. But I think what I would say is the fact this is written into legislation changes things. It gives it more status, but it also means there are certain requirements that need to be met. And it might the question may well be asked tonight: what actual status does a local place plan have? That'll become apparent as I go on. But it's a statutory right, and sorry, just trying to move my slides. Yeah, so the aims of I think I'm not going to read all this out, but that was the thinking of Scottish Government based on a lot of consultation and research and introducing local place plans. I'd really actually say there, giving communities a vehicle on a statutory basis to come up with ideas for changes for your community. So, status of local place plans. If any of you, some of you will know a bit about planning, and the main planning document, if you like, for every area is known as the development plan, which is a concept, and currently that means National Planning Framework 4, which is a national plan for Scotland, and your local development plan. So whatever area of Scotland that you're in, National Planning Framework is a key planning document for you, and we'll look at what that includes in a minute. But also every council or national park has a local development plan. However, as you can see, as configured in the Act, local place plans are not part of the local development plan, are not part of the development plan. They sit alongside. In England, with neighbourhood plans, it was different. They would have been within the dotted circle. But what we've got in Scotland is they sit out with the development plan, which is the statutory planning document that you have to refer to when you're determining a planning application. But as you can see by the arrows, there is a strong interplay between local place plans and the local development plan. We won't worry about regional spatial strategies. That's for another day. So I hope that sets a bit of clarity about where local place plans sit. And the National Planning Framework, again, I think some people here will have heard of that, but that's a National Spatial Plan for Scotland. And it'll become apparent in a minute why NPF4, as we call it generally, is pretty relevant if you're preparing a local place plan. But what it includes, just for your interest, is National Spatial Strategy for Scotland. How do we want the country to develop? 18 national developments and 33 national policies. The new Forth Road crossing was a previous national development, means the government thinks it's really important for Scotland's development, and the principle of it is accepted and approved in the NPF4. But I won't be clicking on these links, but when we on the bottom left, when we send the slides afterwards, if you want to read NPF4, you can click directly on my links. I normally just let people have a quick look at this. It's a wee bit of text, but we think it's quite a useful statement of the government's view. But everyone have a very quick read at that. So there's a lot of information there, but very importantly, a local place plan has to be about the development and use of land. So remember that term. We'll come back to it a wee bit later in the slides. And again, very importantly, a local place plan, if you're producing one for your area, can suggest what what changes you would like to be made to the local development plan. So that might be that you think some policy or text needs changed, or it might be that you want to suggest an area and a piece of land, use and development of land in your area could be used for something new or something different. So it's a way for communities to feed into the local development plan. And yeah, it's about, as I say, it's about local communities to think about how to make their place better, and I guess give a framework for that to be expressed in what it will be a statutory part of the legal part of the planning system. And it's emphasising collaboration, obviously, at the end. Now, I'll be giving you various documents. We can't cover everything tonight, so I'll be referring to key documents, which I list at the end, that you'll probably want to go and refer to afterwards. But so sorry about this. Government circulars explain the planning system to planners. I look at them all the time, but they're also written for other stakeholders, members of the public. So that was Circular 1, 2022, was published about local place plans last year. So I've just pulled out a couple of quotes again, just to reiterate the points sort of already made, but we'll just focus on the one I've underlined at the bottom. A key point is that if local place plans are prepared, the local authority, the council, must take the local place plan into account in the preparation of the relevant local development plan. Now, because of changes to the local development plan process, every local council or national park in Scotland has got to prepare a new local place plan a new local development plan by May 2028. So there's going to be a lot of activity around that, and they have to notify communities in their area when they're starting a new local development plan, and notify that there's an opportunity to register interest if you intend or would like to prepare a local place plan. So I'm going to run through what I'm calling things to know, things I felt would be useful and worth covering at tonight's event. So who can prepare a local place plan? The 2019 Planning Act says you must be a community body. And it has two criteria for what a community body could be. It could be a community council, is automatically a community body in terms of the Act, and you could go ahead and prepare a local place plan by yourselves. And other groups, as defined in the Community Empowerment Act, can also be a community body. I'm not going to go through all that. It's to do with the constitution and the type you have and the type of organisation you are. It's mainly community councils here tonight, as I understand. I mean, I think our view as an organisation is there's potential for community councils and a lot of other groups to collaborate under the umbrella of being a community body. But key point for tonight, community councils are absolutely identified as being a potential lead in preparing a local place plan. We're hearing from quite a few on a weekly basis who are interested and want to know more. Oh, right, this is taken from this government planning circular. If you're preparing a local place plan, the community body must have regard, come back to that, to the local development plan for your area and to national planning framework and to the locality plan, which we're not going to have time to dwell on, but that's another type of plan prepared by the community planning, our community learning and development teams in the council. So we'll just deal with point A first. National Planning Framework 4 has got 33 policies in it. From speaking to councils, they're not expecting you to write an essay on how you would meet each policy. It's more making sure that the local place plan is written in the sort of, is not obviously contradicting. You know, I mean, National Planning Framework 4 has got a big emphasis on climate change, for example. So if you were proposing something that obviously quite possibly didn't obviously fit with that, you might not get your plan registered. And likewise, the same would apply to the local development plan. But at the same time, we know that you can suggest, I think the key point is that as communities, you can suggest changes to the local development plan. And that's what's covered in point B. That is written into the regulations. And we'll look in a minute at stuff that could be relevant. And generally, you have to comply with all the prescribed requirements, although the government's view has been trying to keep it lighter touch, I think, than what happened in England with neighbourhood plans. So we'll look at a checklist of what needs to be done towards the end of this. You can also identify land and buildings of particular significance to your community. I think developers and applicants are going to look at registered local place plans if they're doing their policy review and research properly. So if you've got an asset identified that you want to keep, I mean, I'm not going to say it would be wrong to say that the local place plan 100% would protect that, but it shows what the community's interest and value is. So you also have to have a map that identifies your area. It doesn't have to be your community council area. You could choose to cover 3 community council areas. You can basically draw your own boundary. That's what the legislation says. So you could draw a boundary around the whole town. It's just whatever feels right for you as a community. So you also have to have map-based information that shows, that geographically identifies what your proposals are, and shows in a map-based way what land or buildings you feel are completely significant. I don't think this has to be particularly sophisticated. It depends what level of expertise you have and of course what funding you have. If you're going to do it yourself or are you going to bring in somebody to help do it? So map-based information must be in your local place plan. Right. Okay. I hope that is starting to make you understand what a local place plan is. This is where we're going to look at what it is, what a local place plan is, and what it isn't, because there's lots of different types of community-led plans out there. Climate change plans, sustainable transport plans, community transport plans. I'm just going to use the generic term of community action plans and compare that to what a local place plan is. So community action plans, community-led, wide-ranging, generally list of initiatives for change, people working at the grassroots, quite often about shaping service delivery, what services do old people need, what do young people need, and they're generally supported by the community planning or learning and development teams. Whereas community local place plans got a wee bit more here. Yes, they're community-led. I think they're a narrower focus because under the statutory basis set out, they must be about development and use of land. So that's not mentioned in community action plans. So providing a sort of meals for Meals on Wheels or service probably wouldn't be something relevant to a local place plan, but it would be relevant in a community action plan. Again, unlike the action plans, you have to have regard to the development plan. That's National Planning Framework 4 and the Local Development Plan. And on a statutory basis, you can make proposals for changes or additions to the local development plan, which have to be taken into account in the local development plan preparation. And if you respond to planning applications as a community council, you'll know about material considerations. The government's guidance on local development plans stated that local place plans could be a material consideration to planning applications. A lot of that will get attested at appeal and in the courts. I think what status local place plans have, that's how planning tends to work. So that's just summarising it for you afterwards. And I won't go. We won't do this as a group tonight, but I just thought I would show you. Like we sometimes do this with smaller groups. I would say to you at this point. So, which of these do you think could definitely be in a local place plan, and which do you think would be more for community action plans? So I'll just let you have a wee look for a couple of 10 seconds. Have a wee think. And I'll just flick through the answers, given that we're in just an hour's event tonight. So that's not use and development of land. It's really annoying and really relevant to any community, but it would be something to pick up in a community action plan. Local place plan, yes. Yep, local place plan, definitely. That one, I always say at this point, it's more about services, but if you needed a space or a building or land to establish that service, that would be use and development of land. So actually it could be a local place plan, in my opinion. My colleague Paul wrote this quiz. But it's planning, it's not 1 + 1 = 2, it's always shades of grey. So community action plan, that's maintenance of your area. Again, community action plan. If you want to change a local development plan policy suggestion, that's definitely for your local place plan. And planning doesn't have the gift to cover health service provision. But if you felt there was land that could be used for new homes, that could be in a local place plan. And then I'm just going to visualize that a bit further. I'll give you a few examples here. I'm hoping this will help you start to, rather than read my words, we'll do a bit of visual learning here, and I'll try and visualize what could be in a local place plan. This is just some examples. So excuse me, you had proposals for active travel routes. Yes, that could be relevant in a local place plan. If you were needing to take land, let's say this was from a real example I think we were looking at last year, but I think that was establishing a cycleway or a new walking route, and that can potentially need planning permission. So that's use and development of land. This is a project we did pre-local place plan, but this was in Buckhaven in Fife, and they had a lot of ideas for the town centre. So that could be use and development of land. And could very clearly be, this is another real idea that a community had, I think it was in Fife as well. But we're just using it as a generic example here. If the community felt a playing field needed to be bigger, the red bit, you could suggest in the local place plan that the land should be used for that. Obviously, land ownership kicks in when you want to make this thing happen. So that's just what happens in planning. There would need to be negotiations about the ownership of land and whether the owner was willing, but you can put that down as a benchmark in a local place plan. Sorry. If you're a conservation area and you think the boundary should be changed, absolutely, that's use and development of land. Proposals for mitigating climate change, that totally ties in, as we'll see in a minute, with that National Planning Framework 4. But if they're around use and development of land, I think that's like a wee active travel hub at the top, sustainable urban drainage, these could be use and development of land. Oops, okay. So suggesting allocation for new housing, absolutely. This is an example from Applecross. I think that was the closest we've done to a local place plan. Lots of communities maybe have ideas for where new homes for elderly, young people, affordable co-housing might go. Again, we can't say to you the local place plan makes it happen. You have to then, land ownership and planning permissions kick in, but it's putting it down and that's what you think should happen. And you might even get your land allocated into the local development plan if the council thinks it's a good idea. And that then gives more certainty that that's what the land should be used for in planning terms in the future. Vacant and derelict land, that's a big planning issue. This is just a generic, just showing you what it could look like. You might think, if you imagine the site in the green circle was vacant, you could be proposing community gardens or allotments, community growing spaces. Spoke to another group recently who felt a vacant building would be really suitable as a community, as a food market for the local area. They were in an area where a lot of food growing took place. Right, and just to show you again from the circular, this is what the government pulls out as what could be use and development of land. When you do your community engagement, which is what I'm just coming on to, people will just talk about their place. So you have to decide, is that spatial, is that use and development of land, or is it more for a community action plan? But the government says in the circular that will inevitably happen. Put the other stuff that's not use and development of land in an appendix so that at least it's recorded. I'll end up looking at, I think it was the first local place plan that's been registered in Scotland. They did have quite good funding, but they actually prepared a community action plan at the same time, which is quite interesting. I actually wonder if every community just needs one plan, but that's not the place we're at the moment. There's the planning plans, the local place plans, and then the other plans. So I'll just sort of finish off by looking at what could be involved in preparing a local place plan and resources. I'll speed up a wee bit to make sure you get time for questions. So here's a route map, as I'm calling it. And I think the top bit is saying when you do your community engagement, your research, you do the divergence, you're expanding your thinking, you're going to have people giving you lots and lots of ideas, maybe new ideas if you're the community body who's leading it. And then as you do analysing your data, your prioritization of what are the key issues arising, and then writing the plan, you're narrowing things back down. You probably won't be covering everything in the plan, and you do have to reach agreement about what priorities are. And then you have to submit the plan to the council and register it and hopefully have it approved. This is from our own guidance. I won't go through it because it's in the guidance, which I'll be showing you in a minute, but these are looking at roles that could be useful. This is an ideal scenario. If you've got all of that in your community, you're lucky. But I would always say maybe there are skills, you know, that you don't know about in your members or people that they know or in the community who might want to get involved. So on our website, we've published a guide for community delivery of local place plans. It's an electronic document, but you could, you could print it off. But it's split into 3 parts to try and make it more manageable. So planning and preparing, understanding the issues in your community, and writing and delivering. And that's just another link to remind you of the government circular. We've done a checklist of everything that needs to be done to submit your local place plan. My colleague Paul did this, and I think it's super useful. I won't actually go through this. We don't have time to go through this, but again, it's in the guide. And we're going to come on just to what community engagement needs to be done, and which is what I'm zoning in on there with the arrows. But there's also, of course, the place standard. I think a lot of you will know the place standard or will have been involved in that. It's a useful tool for structuring conversations around place. Good place, what's good and bad, and basically you get people to discuss each of the 14 themes and then get your group to come to a score, 1 being not very good for, say, public transport, and 7 being really good. And then the government guidance on the right still being updated, but watch the space on that. It's a wee bit out of date at the moment. And then Community Maps Scotland. There's one just for me to let you go and look at, but that's a resource that's been developed initially in England, but being rolled out in Scotland. Will help you prepare maps that could be used in your local place plan. To watch the video, and I think they were giving in their first year in Scotland a free 12-month to community councils. Some of you maybe know about that. And just to show you, you know, as we said earlier, you have to have regard to NPF4 policies. There's 33 of them. I've just picked out ones that where I feel some local place plans could possibly be saying, yes, we feel we really align with these policies. Community engagement. Government's kept the regulations pretty light. They're not saying you have to engage with 50% of your community, and that would be quite hard going anyway, in my opinion. But there is, I think, implicit an expectation that you'll run maybe an event or maybe some focus groups for those that are interested. And you have to, when you register your plan, give your view of the level of support you think your plan has got and how you've come to a view of what is in the plan. So nobody's thinking you would really just lock yourselves in a room and write it. You do have to get out there and do some community engagement with your community, and also think about, you know, it's not for today, it'd be a whole another hour's event, but who are the key groups? Children, young people, parents groups at schools, elderly people, just to get your thinking started. I'm not going to go through all these, I'll just let you glance at them, but these are the potential impacts. Third last point, you know, if you've prepared one and you're commenting on planning applications, you could be referring to your local place plan if there was relevant content. Planners, well, doing planning applications should be looking at what the local place plan says as part of their planning reports. But they don't give you absolute power over planning decisions that are made. It would be foolhardy of me to say that that is the case, but they're going to be a consideration. And also they maybe unlock creativity and, ideas and motivation in your community. I think that's often a subset of preparing the plan. You'll need to check what's going on in your own local area after this, but most local authorities are saying they want the local place plan submitted by the evidence report stage of their local development plan, and that is quite often giving quite a tight time frame. You can actually prepare a local place plan whenever you want in the 10-year local development plan cycle, but councils are generally saying it would be good if you can try and get one done by this stage. And these are just my final thoughts. I'm emphasising you absolutely do not have to do a local place plan. Maybe you want a community action plan or a transport plan. I'm going to be very honest and say there isn't funding in place. Generally, some communities do have access to funding. We're not funded to to prepare local place plans, but if a community comes to us with a proposal, we will look at it. But we're limited. We couldn't ever co-prepare, facilitate every local place plan in Scotland. I'd always say collaborate with your council if you are preparing it. Who are your key community leaders? It all has to be reviewed 7 years from the Act in 2019 being passed. So the government will be having a look at how this has worked at that point. And a key point for us is, we do have differences in affluence and poverty in Scotland. So where the local place plan is going to be prepared, that's our resources. We want to be a centre of excellence in education for local place plans. These are some modules that we've developed, which could be useful for community bodies, and those are aimed. That's part of our social enterprise. They're not freebies, but they are positioned at a cost that we think community councils may be able to afford. So you could email me afterwards if you want to know more. That's what I just referred to a minute ago. That was the bit squint, but that's the up in the Highlands first local place plan that was registered. So I think that's a good thing to have a look at and see what they did. But they had, I think it was wind farm funding or something, but they did have funding. So thank you very much for listening to me.